Police have arrested and charged a 20-year-old woman in connection with the plotted robbery that killed a 19-year-old man in the Bronx. Kyla Moreno is facing charges of second-degree murder, first and second-degree robbery, and criminal possession of a weapon in the shooting of Jose Hart. Police believe Moreno was upset at Hart, who was her ex-boyfriend, for releasing a sex tape of them while they were together. Moreno plotted the scheme with three others who police are now searching for. We welcome now criminal defense attorney Alexander Sanchez to help us understand how this case might end. And Alexander, good to have you.
How are you?
Good to have you. Thank you. So I'm doing all right. Listen, when we have this case right here, obviously a lot of different components. Police are still searching for possibly three other suspects. But let's talk about this young lady right now and the charges she's facing.
Well, she's facing murder. She's facing conspiracy to commit murder with other people. She's facing robbery charges, burglary charges, possession of stolen property, possession of a weapon, whole host of charges, each of which carries a significant penalty involved. And by the way, I don't know if you're aware, but they have arrested other people in connection with this case. The other cohorts that were supposedly involved in driving her to this place or entering the place and committing the shooting, they have been arrested. And so they're going to be charged also along with her.
Do they get the same amount of charges that she gets?
Yeah, this is if you're acting in concert. Acting in concert means you are committing a crime with others with the same intention. You're all going to be charged with the same offense. And so each person that's part of this organized conspiracy is going to be charged with the same crimes.
So when you look at a case like this, it pretty much seems open and shut, but then yet and still we know that when things go to court, things can become a whole lot different. What are some of the things that you, from a defense attorney's standpoint, that if you're representing her, that you want to try to bring forward?
You know, I mean, I'm not so sure this is, I mean, it appears open and shut. They have videotapes of her going into the apartment. They have videotapes of these three guys entering the apartment. They have weapons. She made a confession saying they went there to rob. Yeah, that sounds like an open and shut case, but how open and shut is it really? Think about this. She supposedly was taped performing some type of sex act on this guy. Now, the first question I have is whether or not she knew that she was being taped, or was it being done surreptitiously? But whether it's being done surreptitiously or whether or not she voluntarily agreed to have herself taped, she did not agree to have this tape posted on the internet to have a reputation completely destroyed and in front of everybody in the world for here until eternity. And so that, believe it or not, that is going to be one of the focuses of the defense in this case. Because why did she engage in this behavior? Did she engage in this behavior because she was angry at this guy for essentially destroying her reputation? Right? Mm-hmm. You know, and her defense is going to be that, you know, maybe she felt she had no alternative but to engage in some type of retaliatory action. She said she did not go there to commit murder. She said that she went there to commit robbery. Her dignity was robbed. And in her mind, she's thinking, well, I'm going to rob him of his television set or some property to get even. Now, to a normal, stable person, that's maybe improper thinking. To a person that maybe has mental health issues, to a person that maybe has some disability issues, or to a very young person, that may make more sense to them. And that's going to be part of the defense in this case.
So this leads to death, and so consequently now she has to face these charges.
Yeah, because if you're engaged in committing a felony, and robbery is a felony, and burglary is a felony, and somebody dies during the commission of that felony, that's called felony murder, right? So, but you know, her defense is, listen, I was not trying to perpetrate a murder. I was trying to go in there and basically get some retribution for what had happened to me. Mm-hmm. And another thing is whether or not, you know, if we look at that sex tape that she participated in voluntarily, was it voluntary? Was she coerced in any way by this guy, right? And what about the people that committed the offense with her? Did they coerce her in any way? I mean, if there's some degree of coercion here, that's important. Right. In determining whether or not she should be penalized for this action.
And there's also another piece of information that we want to bring out. Investigators thought that Hart may have been killed because he had recently boasted about a $50,000 windfall that his family had received, and his mother had won a $50,000 settlement after suing a motorist after a car accident. So money being a possible motive in this too.
Yeah, I mean, look, the police, when they come upon this scene, they find somebody dead in an apartment. They do some investigation. They find the family had won $50,000, and he apparently was talking about it. So they're thinking, well, this might be a motive. Certainly money is always a motive, although I don't know how many people are putting $50,000 in their house based upon a settlement check they're getting from the city, but this was one of the motives they thought. But they did further investigation, and they recovered these videotapes, and they found her going into the apartment. I don't think it was easy. It was very hard to track her down. She's brought in, she made a confession, and most likely she gave the names up of the other individuals because most of them at this point have been arrested and they were identified, and that was done pretty quickly. How is that done unless she gave that information to the police? And then they tracked down these individuals.
We do have word they're still looking out for a couple of more suspects. Don't know exactly what that might be, but we'll see. Our leadoff story, talking about Deborah Danner, the 66-year-old grandmother that was actually shot by a police officer. And now the district attorney is saying, listen, we want to present this information to the grand jury. This is normal practical procedure.
I would say that in a death, yes, this makes a lot of sense to present it to the grand jury. But you know, the grand jury, people think that the grand jury is conducting some type of investigation. The grand jury is ordinary citizens. They're not investigators. They're not police. They're just citizens. They're picked by lottery number to sit in the grand jury. They just listen to evidence. They're not the ones that are conducting the investigation. The ones that are conducting the investigation are the police and the district attorney's office. And then they present their findings to the grand jury. But I would say that it is definitely a positive start in this case to present information to the grand jury, because if this cop did something improper, and there is a legitimate issue whether or not he did, the grand jury has the option of charging this guy with some type of a criminal offense. Now, he has the right, after this case is presented to the grand jury, to go before the grand jury himself and to give his side of the story and say, listen, you know, I went into that apartment, this woman picked up the bat, it's a dangerous weapon, and if I'm being assaulted with a dangerous weapon, I have a right to defend myself, and I used a gun. Now, you may think that's overkill, but that is the law, and that is what he's going to say, I expect, if he testifies in the grand jury.
And there you saw his picture, the sergeant who was alleged in the shooting. Now, let's talk about this for a moment. Police-community relations, because obviously when the district attorney makes a statement like that, she knows the heightened sense of awareness of what's going on here between police and community. Good move, bad move in terms of really just getting out there and handling police-community relations?
I think it's a good move. Listen, people are watching this case. People want to know that if the police officer, and I'm not saying he did or did not act improperly, okay, but if he did act improperly and someone is dead, there should be an investigation. And the people of the Bronx want to know that this case is being investigated. They want to know that action is being taken, including the possible presentation to a grand jury. I mean, if this case is like swept under a rug and there's no investigation and this cop is given some minor disciplinary slap on the wrist without a further detailed investigation, that's going to get a lot of people very suspicious and angry. We don't want that. Nobody wants that. We want a legitimate investigation. The police want a legitimate investigation. And so I think that this is a good move, and it should satisfy a lot of people in the Bronx, although if they bring no charges, there's certainly going to be some people that are not going to be satisfied.
Well, we know the history of what goes on here in our borough. I mean, when it comes to the issue of really, you can indict a police officer, take a police officer to trial, but so far in the borough of the Bronx, we don't see very many convictions. You could probably count them on your hand. The amount of officers who've been either convicted on either on a criminal way or even civil.
I'll tell you one thing, in the last couple of years, there's been more convictions than you think. Take, for example, I mean, these are correction officers, but they're law enforcement personnel, and a lot of them recently have been arrested for committing offenses against inmates at Rikers Island, and there was a big trial in the Bronx, and all these guys got convicted, or most of them got convicted. There was a second trial recently where there was additional allegations against other officers for committing violence against inmates. They were convicted too, and they were sentenced to substantial amounts of time in jail. So, and there was recently a police officer that went on trial for killing his daughter's boyfriend. He was convicted also. So I would say in the last couple of years, the tides are turning. You know, when I first started working around here, I began to notice that a lot of police officers that went on trial, what I saw happening here was that a police officer would get arrested, he would waive a jury. Now, anywhere in the United States almost, you have a right to have a jury. You have a right to have a jury trial, but you have a right to waive a jury and let a judge decide whether or not you're guilty or innocent. So what I was noticing for many years was a lot of police officers were waiving juries. They were waiving juries and letting a judge decide whether or not they were guilty. And it seemed to me that there was an inordinate number of police officers that were being found not guilty. I began to go to some of these trials to watch, right? Because they were being conducted in certain courtrooms before certain judges. I became suspicious. I went and I watched to find out what is going on. And you know what? In certain cases, my suspicions were confirmed that there was something not exactly right happening here. And that is a fact. I've discussed this with some of my other attorneys in the case, and they agree with me. So, you know, but things are changing. Things are changing.
Of course, and we'll continue to see. Criminal defense attorney Alexander Sanchez here. Once again, thank you for the update and bringing us the information.
Always great to be here.
All righty, listen, taking a quick break, but when we return, we're going to tell you what one organization is doing to stop gun violence. Don't go anywhere. Be right back in just a few.